before we get into the specifics of the case, what were your overall thoughts about this case?
This case is challenging. When I was actually asking questions about family, I felt that I don't have right to do that. I assume that not being a psychologist or even like studying, going that path, sleep coaches are a bit limited. They actually cannot ask those questions, like to my mind.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that in your thought process. Your instinct in terms of being very cautious and respecting our scope and boundaries to practice is honored, and I want to acknowledge that. I would err on the side when in doubt, refer out, when in doubt, question. Don't jump into a situation that you feel uncomfortable or uncertain about. You never want to jump into supporting a client where you're not sure if you're doing the right thing or if you're overstepping. If you're ever in that situation, it's best to take a step back, do some research, connect with a colleague or advisor, even reach out to us to then get our support and our feedback in regards to following through with the case. Now, let's talk about the facts in terms of legally where we stand here. Legally, unless you diagnose, unless you treat, unless you examine, and diagnosing mean by labeling, unless you literally say, oh, your husband's being emotionally abusive, this is an emotional abuse case, etc., and you label it, unless you do those things, and unless you begin to treat and intervene by treating the specific emotional abuse case where you're doing trauma processing, inner child work, and unless you're advising them legally on what they should be doing and how to get out of the situation. If you're not doing any of those things and you're simply just gauging whether the situation is safe or not safe, it's not out of your scope of practice at all. I'm going to share with you actually how to do that and how to navigate around this. You are more than welcome to ask questions as they relate to sleep, okay? Because remember, sleep and emotions, sleep and stress are tied, right? They go hand in hand. And so if it's a stressful situation, if it's an unsafe situation, then asking specifically about that is within our scope of practice. Now, how do we get around it? Well, I'm going to actually go through your questions first because I want to see how you asked your questions. But what I will say is that there's a specific way to ask questions that's not overstepping. And there's a specific way to ensure that you're not labeling, unless the client themselves label it. If the client says, I believe my husband's being emotionally abusive, you don't even have to use the label, but you could say, oh, what makes you think that? Why would you say that? When does this start? How long has this been going on? Some of you I've seen have already asked, has this behavior been there before your children? Is this behavior recent? Right? Because at that point, you're not being a psychologist. At that point, you're just kind of gauging what's going on, where this person's at, what's happening to really understand the situation and what you're getting into or in what you may need to get out of, which we'll talk about both. We'll talk about what the scenario is for you to help and what the scenario is for you to say, mm-mm, this needs immediate help. I can't step into this situation.